John, we have somebody who's joined us previously, Dave Dombrowski, the president of baseball operations for the Philadelphia Phillies. His team has the best record in the major leagues as he'll be joining us. What do you think about having Dave on our show?
Yeah, really looking forward to this. Not only one of our favorites, but one of the best general managers, baseball presidents, whatever you want to call them, ever. I mean, the World Series appearances that he's had with multiple teams, won a couple of World Series, and now he's got the Phillies with the best record in baseball. So he does an incredible job, and really looking forward to this.
Sure. Four teams he's taken to the World Series, four different organizations. We'll ask him about these Phillies, all the good stuff that's going on with them. You and I will talk about Juan Soto's contract, Pete Alonso's contract, where the Mets and Yankees are at a little bit. We'll play hit and error at the end if you stick with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman. John, since we last did this, our good friend Jack Curry had Hal Steinbrenner on his podcast, and Hal Steinbrenner opened the Pandora's box a little bit again, right? He talked about the fact that, no secret, he wants to keep Soto long-term, but at some point he'd like to make a foray into seeing if he could get something done with him during the year. Scott Boras said, sure, I'll always take Hal Steinbrenner's phone calls, but it's generally not his practice, especially with his best clients, to get this far down the line and not get to free agency. My suspicion is you and I will be having to deal with this post-World Series. But what do you think about the Yankees and Soto and the chances of an early marriage or a marriage in general?
Well, I don't think it hurts that Hal Steinbrenner came out and said that he wants to sign him. We all knew that he wanted to sign him and that he wants to do it in season. That's fine. I think Soto had a 4-hit game soon after that, or maybe it was the next game. I don't know, but I don't think he'll be distracted. I don't think it's going to hurt anything. But, I'm not going to put the chances at 0, but what's the next thing above 0? It's, maybe 1, maybe not even 1%. I mean, let's face facts here. Soto has declined 7 offers to this point, right? He's now closer to free agency than he has ever been. There is almost no chance that he's going to be able to do a deal right now with Juan Soto. He's months away from free agency. Yeah, you said Scott Boras is the best client. This is his best client, number 1, right? This is the guy. He's going to break the record. He's not going to sign a contract now. I mean, you don't like to rule anything out, but we're going to put this at 1%.
John, one of the things I think about is, look, he's 25 years old. Historically, he's in the group with Ted Williams and all the great pre-25-year-old guys. So he's never going to need a tin cup here. There'll be a lot of teams that are interested in him. But if I were thinking, what is like the lowest number that maybe gets this done? Ohtani's real today value is a little over 46 million, right? For the luxury tax purposes. So say like we say in real money, it's 47 a year times 12. That's 12 at 564. I feel like the first thing Boras will say is that only takes him to age 37. Why does he get to 37, but Judge gets to 39? So he's like, you want to make that 14? Well, now we're up over 600. So I'm not even sure where to start with this. And then once I talk about numbers like this, I'm not sure, as great as he is, are we talking about more of a bidding war than the Yankees and maybe the Mets? I mean, do you think that this is the one where the Red Sox suddenly say, we have to act like the Red Sox, or the Cubs, who don't want to do this kind of stuff, says, we're going to do it? Like I'm looking for where the field is.
Yeah, I mean, it could be surprise teams. I mean, this is an all-time great player. Now, will there be a ton of teams? That's one thing I may differ with you on that. I'm not sure there's going to be a ton of teams because
we don't differ. I don't think there'll be a ton of teams. I'm thinking, is it New York, New York?
Well, I think New York and New York are the favorites. I think, and when I say I don't think he's going to sign in season, it doesn't mean I don't think he's going to sign with the Yankees. I think the Yankees are the favorite. I think he's loving it there. He loves the roll call. He's showing his personality. This is the place for him. I think he's got relatives here. He wants to be on the East Coast, I believe. So, I mean, I think the Yankees are favored to get him. I think the Mets, obviously, with Steve Cohen there, you can't rule them out. And we've been mentioning them as a potential suitor, I think, since the day the Yankees acquired him. So, I mean, I think those are the two most likely teams. And is there somebody else who's going to outbid New York and New York? I'm not ruling it out. I just don't see a large field for a guy who's going to get, as you said, probably 600 million plus. I don't think that camp is going to settle at 500 million at this point. So I think your estimates are probably pretty good. I mean, he's 25 years old. We saw what Yamamoto got, right? Yamamoto had never thrown a pitch in the major leagues. Looks like a pretty good signing so far. I mean, it's early, but he got, what did he get? 325 plus 50 million, 375 million for a guy that didn't throw one pitch. This is a guy who's, he's, in terms of walks, at least, he's ahead of Mickey Mantle and right there with Ted Williams, and all the all-time greats. And his stats are amazing. They love him. His personality has worked. He's improved in the outfield. So, I'm saying it, New York are the likely scenarios. But in season, nah, I don't see it.
Yeah, John, you mentioned it. I think he was fairly miserable on the West Coast. So I think almost half the country has to be eliminated. Everything I hear is he's especially close to his mother. And when the games are ending at 2:00 in the morning out there, he doesn't want to not be able to call his mom or come home and she's up.
We're all close to our mothers, right?
Right. But I guess what I'm saying is, like the Giants have been trying to get a star like this for years.
Right.
I almost throw them out because I'm not sure that he'll play there. So he's not going to be in need of you and I saving him. This isn't going to be
no, not at all. I'm just saying,
but I think it's a very condensed group of teams. And the one that fascinates me is, at what point do the Red Sox say again, hey, we're kind of the Red Sox, we can play in this market? I'm not sure under this ownership they're going to do it again.
Yeah, I mean, the better the player, the smaller the field. I think Ohtani was an extreme example where he had so much marketing value that you had some unusual teams that were in the mix. Yeah, the Giants, they have trouble getting guys with that stadium. It's going to be difficult to get a hitter to go there. And, how much more are they going to have bid? I'm not sure that he was as miserable as people say on the West Coast, but I agree with you. He, I believe, prefers the East Coast. I mean, do guys go from the Yankees to the Red Sox? I mean, I've seen the other way around. We've seen that work, right?
Yeah.
But to go from the Yankees to the Red Sox, I don't know. Maybe it's all about the dollar. But if that's the case, you got to give Cohen more of an edge than the Red Sox, right? The Red Sox didn't even pay for Mookie Betts, homegrown superstar. Obviously, that was a mistake. And they think they made up for it with Devers, who's hot right now, but not Mookie Betts. I just think I'm going to be, I'm not going to say shocked. I'll be very surprised if it's not the Yankees or the Mets. And I would say the Yankees are the favorite. I think that's fair, but in season, not happening.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on both counts, John. I can't imagine it happening in season. And, if it's the Yankees and Mets, I don't even think you need a third or fourth. It's nice to have the third or fourth team, but the Yankees aren't going to want him to go to Cone, and Cone probably prefers to do something that for his fan base that upsets the Yankees. So that would just be enough. On that subject, why don't we flip over to the Mets a little bit? Over the weekend, I wrote a longer piece about what Pete Alonso was offered. It was 7 years at $158 million last June. It's part of a bigger issue to me, John. You are down in Miami, and you were with the team in Miami as Diaz blew up. I just want to give you even after Scherzer and Verlander are off this roster, there are 6 long-term contracts done under Steve Cohen. It's Lindor, Nimmo, Diaz, Senga, Marte, and McNeil. It's 22 years at $496 million left starting in 2025. Of that 6 players, Nimmo's doing okay. The batting average is low, but the on-base percentage, the home run, he's fine. The other 5 guys are either hurt or underperforming. Notably Diaz, notably Senga, who hasn't been on the field, Lindor's not, the whole group. Do you think that hurts Alonso's chances of getting a long-term contract from Cohen, who's like I did all this to kind of try to paper over the rot from the Wilpons?
Yeah.
Am I wrong to do this again with a non-athletic corner guy as much as my fan base might like Alonso?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, but he wants to win, and this year maybe they'll sneak into the playoffs. Maybe, who knows? Maybe I'll be right about that. Maybe they'll get in. but they're not going to win the World Series. They're not a world beater. They're not the team that he wants. So I don't think so. And I'm going to look at that Senga deal as still a good deal. Look at the dollar figure on it, right? He was great last year, right?
It's a shoulder injury, though. That was
Yeah.
why does that worry me more than elbow?
I get it going forward, but what was he worth last year? He was an ace last year, right? So,
Right.
he's already probably paid half that contract. The value's already been half of that contract, and he's got years to go. So, I think that one was okay. Nimmo, I agree with you. That was good. Yeah, the others look over at this point, right? Now, I think he's probably learned his lesson on his 40-year-old pitchers. Alonso's not a 40-year-old pitcher, right? Alonso is so popular with the fans, and Cone he didn't buy the team to be unpopular, and he's not, right? He's got 70% approval rating from what I've seen. I think it's going to be difficult for him to let him go. That's just my opinion. I mean, if he's overpriced and it's so far out of what they're thinking, it could happen, obviously. But I think that he's not going to be affected by the past. I don't want to say mistakes. We'll see. Lindor is obviously off to a terrible start this year offensively, but maybe that one will be okay. Certainly Nimmo looks good. I think Senga's fine. And you could write off the older pitchers. So I don't think he's going to be affected by it, but I get the point.
Well, affected to the extent of, I'm assuming that Pete Alonso doesn't hire Scott Boras as an agent to get 6 years at about 132. That's what on a 7-year, $158 million contract that was going to cover his arbitration year. We're talking like probably 6 at 138 was probably the free agent years on that. Obviously, now he's a complete free agent. There could be bidding. The marketplace does not like this kind of player. And I'll tell you one that's amazing, John. I put it in my online column today. If you take Rhys Hoskins' last healthy season, which was 2022 in the beginning of this year, and Pete Alonso's 2023 and 2024 so far, they're the same player. The numbers are exact clone. By the way, Hoskins is another Boras client. He'll go out on the market. Now, he's 2 years older. He's not as durable. But like at the most, does he cost 2 at 34, 3 at 45? And I could get 90% of Alonso? I know he could play in a big city. I'm just where I think that Alonso Boras want to go up over 200 million, maybe more than that. I don't know how many teams in this philosophical age are going to go there with them.
Yeah. Well, I think, I get it. That's a management kind of position on Alonso. I'll give you the other side of Alonso, right? I mean, Alonso's hit more home runs than anybody since he came into the league, right? So that's a unique player. If you look at that list, and I like Rhys Hoskins, but he's not even in the top 10 in that list. He's probably not even in the top 20 in that list, right? We're talking about number one, right? So that's a unique player. Alonso's ability to stay on the field, and you're very big on this, right? And that's why you favor the innings for the Cy Young and all that stuff. His ability to stay on the field is incredible. He was supposed to be out 6 weeks last year. How many times have we seen a guy who's going to be out 6 weeks and he's out 6 months, right? And he was out 10 days. The guy plays all the time. So reliability, power, he's really at the top.
And the ability to play in
defense, he's as good as Rizzo. You watch the teams even more than I do, right? They're pretty comparable. I think they're average first. Now at this point, Rizzo was a platinum winner, right? He's an average first baseman.
Yeah. Wouldn't want to use Rizzo
has worked his way up and become an average first baseman. So I think that's a management comp. I'd give you the other side and say he's a unique player, with reliability, and it's going to be different for him. And I don't think he's going to be talking about 6 for 132 or anything like that.
No,
it's going to be higher. It's going to be a lot higher.
Yeah, he's going to look, the flip side. And again, I get it. I know the arguments. I've certainly talked to Boras enough. New York proven, durable power. I know how it's going to be sold. And I get Matt Olson did his contract 2 years before free agency, but their numbers are very, very similar.
Sure.
Olson's durability is at least as good as Pete's. He just played over his 500 straight games, right? His power, I think he's number 2 in homers or number 3 in that period of time. He probably maybe undersold himself by doing it early, but I I think the Prince Fielder, the Pujols, the Cabrera, those kind of guys are going to scare people off. Is there one team out there that's willing to say, I love the power, I love the durability, I love that he's New York proven, I don't think things are going to bother him? Yeah. Where does that drive it? Does that drive it to 175? Does it drive it to 2? Does it drive it to 225? I think that there's a number where Cohn says, even me, as much as keeping an historic Met, I don't want to go there. And I think some of it is about feeling burned by some of this stuff he's done early here.
Well, first on Olson, he had 2 years to go to free agency. He's escaping Oakland and going to his hometown team, right? So, I mean, if I'm him at that point, I'm taking anything, right? And I think that deal was a good deal considering 2 years to go before free agency, going to his hometown team, escaping Oakland or Sacramento, Las Vegas, whatever they're going to be. So that I don't think that's a fair comp.
Do you think Olson gets
players they
over
are.
do you think Olson as a free agent right now would get over 200?
Yes, I do.
All right.
But
Well,
Olson's a better defender than
and
Pete.
left-handed.
Right, he's a better defender. I think 200 is probably the magic number. You
Yeah.
know, the question is, does Steve Cohen have to, will he pay for $200 million or won't he?
Yeah.
My feeling is I think he probably will, and that'll probably be the number. Now, I'm sure Boris will shoot a lot higher than that. I'm sure, would you say 158 was the number? You know, a year's gone by. You know, obviously now it's going to be a free agent, so they know it's going to have to be higher than 158, right? So maybe they'll be at 170 or something like that. I mean, 200 is probably the magic number. If he gets to the 200, and I think he will, I think he'll be a Met.
Yeah. And, Cohn, who clearly has shown he wants to have a better bridge to their history, might see a value in paying for keeping Alonso as a full-time Met. One of the reasons the Mets are probably not winning the NL East this year is not only that the Atlanta Braves are ahead of them, who've won the last 6 years in a row, but the Philadelphia Phillies have the best record in the sport. The architect of that team, the president of baseball operations, Dave Dombrowski, joins us next on the show. John and I are so happy to have Dave Dombrowski, the president of baseball operations for the Philadelphia Phillies. Dave, I could probably go on for about 5 minutes. I hope everyone knows who you are. 4 organizations taken to the World Series, 2 have won the championship, one of the most successful executives in the history of the whole game, and adding to your resume this year with the 34-14, 708 winning percentage Philadelphia Phillies. And Dave, like when I look at this team, I'm not exactly sure. I've been thinking about what the first question is, but I want to say this is you have stars and you have had great supporting cast. And it feels this year like the supporting cast has decided to become stars. Bohm, Stott, Ranger Suarez, Brandon Marsh. Those guys are the 4 guys leading your team in WAR this year. And your stars are still stars. Why have those guys grown to this to make you 34-14?
Well, it's a great question. And I think going into the season, when we were talking about the planning of our team from last year, if we wanted to take the next step to be really, really good, to be a 90 plus, trying to win 100 games, those young players needed to take that next step. Because when you look at Bohm, when you look at Stott, when you look at Marsh, Suarez, but Bohm and Stott were both first-round draft choices. Marsh was a second-round draft choice that talent-wise would have been a first-round draft choice if he'd have played baseball more baseball. He played football, multi-sport athlete. And then Suarez has been a talented pitcher for a long time. So I think they've continued that growth process rather than stagnate. And I think that's extremely important. So it's a tip of the cap to them. It's a tip of the cap to the coaching staff, because they're in a position where that's not always easy to do. So when those guys take that step, and they in turn take that step combined with still having those stars in the prime of their career, the Harpers, the Turners, the Realmutos, you can go on with the list, the Wheelers, the Nolas, et cetera. You're all of a sudden in a position where, well, you become a really, really good team. And I think that's what's taken place.
You obviously have a really, really good team, and you knew going in it would be good. Did you know it'd be this good? 34-14. You're 20 over about a third of the way through the year. So, I mean, you're on pace to finish 60 over. Are you this good?
Well, I hope so, but no, I don't think you ever predict that, right? I mean, you're never in a if you can win 100 games in major league level, that's good. I mean, I've been on some really good teams and rarely have won 100 games. So that's a situation where if you can win 100 games, I would hope that we could challenge that. But one of the extreme bugaboos we've had, as you're aware, is we haven't started off quickly in the recent years. We started off slowly. And it was something that we addressed in the wintertime going into spring training and different conversations that take place. And we were in a position where that became an emphasis for us. And so being in a position where we tried to do that, maybe do a couple things a little bit differently. And fortunately, now we're out of the gate much more quickly. So that makes a difference, I believe, in where we are. So I would never have predicted. I don't think anybody predicts being in the May 20th that you're 20 games above 500. I think that would be a little crazy in anybody's respect.
Dave, can I dig in that? I find that interesting. What kind of stuff that was implemented to try to get you out of the gate quicker?
Well, things such as making sure our starting pitchers were more prepared to go deeper into the game than they were past in maybe the past year. When we've been in the postseason, sometimes there's the caution that goes out there that, hey, we have to really be careful. And not that you're not always careful with your guys, right? I mean, you always never want to push them too much. You don't want to have them throw too many pitches. You don't want to have them come back too quickly. But there's just a different emphasis of maybe not pitching on the backfields versus pitching in a regular game, just a little different intensity level, and maybe being prepared to throw more pitches with that type of mindset when you come out of the gate, which you in turn can go and increase as the month of April progresses. Now, part of that ends up being in a position where you also need health, of course, in that regard. And we came in and we had Wheeler and Nola were healthy. Suarez was healthy this year. Sanchez continues to develop in that regard. Walker had a little bit of a setback. He was the one, but fortunately for us, we had Turnbull that stepped in. So that was one of the things, maybe having a few more at bats in regular spring training games, or a little more attention to getting them a little more work early. So little things like that. And just the constant talk of, hey, let's get out of this and not try to dig ourselves a hole in the beginning of this season and have to dig ourselves out, and let's start off more quickly. So those are some general type of conversations, and I'm sure most organizations have.
You've got the two aces on that team with Wheeler and Nola, two of the best pitchers in the game, which has been kind of a hallmark of your teams. Obviously, you had that in Detroit, at least two aces with obviously Verlander and Scherzer. But I want to ask you about Ranger Suarez, who's been your best pitcher this year and a Cy Young candidate. Where did this come from? How does he do it? I mean, everybody else is trying to throw 100. He doesn't do that, but he does something right. What is it?
Well, he really knows how to pitch, Ranger Suarez, and he has great command of multiple pitches. People forget, and I'm always mesmerized with him because he has really been a good pitcher when he's gone out there and pitched. And so when you look to when he first stepped into the rotation for us a few years back, he set a record, I believe, at that time for the lowest earner on average for somebody that pitched that number of games. But he only pitched because he was in the bullpen early in the year and we transitioned him to doing that. The second part of it is that unfortunately he's always had a little bit of difficulty coming into spring training, visa issues, sometimes being a little bit tender. Last year with the WBC, which again I'm an advocate of, but it was one of those where he ended up getting hurt, wasn't ready quite to start the season. So this was the first spring in a few years where we had him from the very beginning in shape, ready to lengthen out and get prepared for the season. So he's always had that. And when you look at his postseason record and you see him pitch in those games, I'm just as thrilled when he takes the mound as anybody that we have. He really has that feel of pitching. So he's got great command. You can go back to when he was a young kid. He didn't walk anybody. So that combination, that all of a sudden you're in a position that, to me, if you try to have a really good club and you try to be in a position where all of a sudden you can get a nice winning streak at some point, it usually starts with your starting pitching. And if you can go out there and you can give yourself a little edge most days with the starting pitcher, and it being Wheeler, Nola, Suarez, Well, most days you have at least an equal chance to win with whoever they match up with. And don't discount, I mean, Sanchez is coming a la like those other guys are. So when he goes out there, we're matching up. The other day was up to 98 with a great changeup and 94, 95 most sinkers. And as we know, Tyon Walker is a quality big league pitcher. He won 15 games last year, 170 innings. He's a little bit different because he's got that split going when he's healthy. But all of a sudden, those big three really give you an opportunity to match up with anybody's big three in a short series.
Dave, we did our opening segment before you joined us, and one of the subjects was we were talking about the Mets. Essentially, the guys they signed to long-term contracts, free agents, etc., they aren't playing well. What I find remarkable about your group is people say they want to stay out of free agency and out of big contracts. It's an inefficient market. Your guys play well. Harper, Real Muto, Turner, who's obviously on the IL right now. Castellanos has struggled a little this year, but he's been a good sign for you. Schwarber's been a good sign for you. Wheeler, Nola now again. Why are you guys good at what other people are bad at, which is figuring out who to kind of quote unquote gamble on long term?
Well, I wish I knew a golden rule to that. But I would say a couple of things. One is all those players that you talked about are really good players. I mean, so sometimes you have to like differentiate between who's really that extra level versus who's not. We've been fortunate with that group. And sometimes you're just fortunate. I mean, you're just in a position where your guys perform well. Every one of those guys you talked about, I can't speak for other players with other organizations. They're all gamers. They want to play every single day. You do your background to make sure that they're those type of players, and they are. They work hard, so they try to stay healthy. They do everything they possibly can. We have a good training and conditioning group, which I'm sure a lot of other organizations do. But sometimes you need to be fortunate when they're out there. But they all are, none of them are content just with their contracts. They all want to excel, win championships, be out there every single day. In fact, one of the challenges Rob Thomson has is making sure that he properly rests guys because they all want to be out there all the time. So, but I think the group of players you talked about, they're just really, really good players, and we've been fortunate they've stayed healthy.
Now, you've been great with free agency. This is a guy who actually signed before you got there, Bryce Harper. I want to ask you about him specifically. I don't think you're going to tell me whether you're going to give him the first extension for a guy with 7+ years to go. That's probably an ownership decision. You can correct me if I'm wrong there, but tell me about Bryce Harper and what your thoughts are on him as a ball player.
Well, Bryce Harper's a great player. I mean, it's just he's a very, very talented player that he can do things. First of all, I'll start at the plate. Not many players can do what he can do. I mean, the ball just jumps off his bat. He's got good command of the strike zone. He's a championship caliber player, rises to the occasion. So he's all of that. And he's driven to be the best. So it's hard to top that. He's a great athlete. And he's also a very intelligent baseball player. So to me, like when he made the transition to first base, which is not that easy, and he worked hard. He wants to be the best. He wants to be a perfectionist in that regard. But he has the instincts of the game. He automatically understands what's going to happen. So he's just he's a great player. Now, the one challenge he has had for him at times is staying on the field for 162 games because he plays so hard all the time. And not injuries that there's a little pull here or there. Most of them are traumatic injuries. You get hit with a pitch, you end up running into a wall, something along those type of lines. But he's really a great player. He's a pleasure to watch day in and day out basis. To me, no question, if he stays healthy over the time period, which I believe he will, because he works very hard to do so. You're watching a Hall of Famer, so you can't say that about many players that you watch day in and day out in your career.
Dave, a lot of the players who've come up in this conversation speak to your depth, right? You lost Trey Turner, and Stott and Sosa have made that more than bearable. They've both played well for you, right? You signed Whit Merrifield, goes to second base. You feel like the team that has everything, and yet you're a contender. From the outside looking in, maybe you need some more bullpen help. How early in the process does a veteran executive like you, would you make a trade right now? Are you talking to teams right now? Take us through this process for someone who knows they have a contending team and it's only late May.
Well, we have a contending club. There's no question about it. And I think if we stay relatively healthy, we have a chance to be in the battle with anybody when it comes to the end. So you're always looking to get better. So when any opportunity exists, you'll engage in it. I think the difficulty ends up becoming that if you engage now, it really has to be the right acquisition for you, because the closer you get to the deadline, who knows what your biggest need may be at that point due to health. That's usually what the case ends up being. If you told me we were going to stay perfectly healthy from now till July 30th, it is this year, well, that would be one thing. But when you've been around enough, you don't know how that will change. So if the right opportunity came up, you do it at any time. But you also have to be careful, because you only have so many bullets you can play. And the chemistry of our club is extremely important too, because they're together as a team. So every club can get a little bit better, but I've been on clubs too where, and I'll just use an example for us right now, who's maybe struggling a little bit more than other guys, Sir Anthony Dominguez. Well, Sir Anthony's got a great arm. He's still throwing close to 100, and he's got a good slider. His command's not quite as good, but we've seen that with him before. And then all of a sudden he straightens it out. And I remember in the postseason in 2022, he was like that in September. And then all of a sudden in the postseason, he was fantastic. So you have to make sure that you're weighing all those things and don't do something that you later regret, and you have that answer right on your own club in that regard.
Let me ask you about one of our other favorites, and that's Rob Thomson. Why did you settle on him? Why do you think he's the right choice? And I should ask, and I assume he would have said no anyway. Jim Leyland has been very successful for you in multiple places previously, Florida, now Miami and Detroit. Did you try hiring Leyland at that time, or did you just say, Rob's the right guy for this team right now?
Well, there was a couple things. Jim Leyland, we're very close and close friends and all. I know Jim Leyland didn't want to manage again. So that's an easy. I mean, if Jim Leyland wanted to manage, he'd be managing somewhere at this point, because he's just too good. And it's not the game itself. And knowing Jim, even back to when he left the Tigers at that point, it was the travel, all the extra things that just wore him down. So really in our situation, it really came down to I felt that we needed to make a change. Just the chemistry, it just wasn't working for us. We just needed a different voice. And it had to come internal if we were going to change quickly, because otherwise you have to go through a long interview process, which we just didn't have the time to do that where we were. So you look at your staff members and who they would be, and Rob Thomson was an obvious choice in that regard. He knows the game inside out, been the right-hand man to the manager for years, well-respected in the clubhouse. Players have a good respect for him, much more even keeled, made players feel comfortable coming here, youngsters and all that. So he was an obvious choice. I could never have told you about him, nor anyone else that I've ever been involved in, that he would be as successful as he is right now. Thought he would do a good job for us, but you never know until you get in that position. And I can go back to when we hired Alex Cora, right, with Boston. Well, we won world championship in the first year. I think Alex is a great manager. But it was a situation where I thought he would be good, but until you get in that role and you see somebody in there, because the manager's job is huge. It is such a big job. There is so much that's involved in it. And if one thing ends up being a major challenge for you, handling the pitching staff, let's say that's an issue. Communication with the players, communication with the media, communication with the front office, all those, and there's so many more things. But if any of them become a major issue for you, all of a sudden that job can become even a bigger challenge, because you're tackling those issues. And Rob Thomson really walked in and from the very beginning was open-minded to conversations, not only with me, but with others within the organization. But he just adjusted so easily and had the respect of individuals. And fortunately, it worked out, because he's been fantastic for us.
Well, to know Rob Thomson is to be happy for his success. You mentioned the term open-minded there. Dave, you started doing this in 1978, and you've had incredible success through 5 organizations, again, 4 of whom you've taken to the World Series. Even when you were mentioning what you guys were willing to do in spring training to try to have your team better prepared to open up, it shows adaptability. right? For you, what do you think is the biggest change? You've had success everywhere, but where have you changed the most over these almost 5 decades in the game?
Great question. Yeah, I think probably the ability to just understand delegation, understand that, like for me, I'm doing my passion, right? I love the game of baseball. I'm doing my passion. My kids have grown now; they're 24 and 26. My wife's been part of this with me for years, and so I've been around younger people with my kids, which I think has been very helpful for me because it keeps you contemporary in what's taking place. But I think that, for example, when I first started, and I know I had this mentality, well, you were in the office at 9 o'clock in the morning and you worked through game time and you went home and you came back and did the same thing the next day. Well, you know what? That doesn't work anymore. People don't come in the morning at 9 o'clock. Some people can work out of their homes and still do a good job. They don't have to be here. So I think open-mindedness to what's important for the contemporary individuals, because the key is making sure you have good people with you and run your different departments and contribute to the organization. And not all of them maybe believe that in today's world, coming at 9 o'clock isn't all that important, really. I mean, they still get their work done and they do it in different fashions. So I think being open-minded in that regard, that's been a big change in my mindset. And that's adjusted throughout the years.
You know, I was with you last year at the NLCS, and I still can't believe you guys didn't win that one after winning game 2, 10-0. Now, you've been through a lot of series. You've won a couple World Series. You've been in the World Series, I think, 5 times. I think you had to me, there's often upsets in the World Series. You had one of the biggest upsets when you swept through the LCS and then played the Cardinals and weren't yourself. What do you think happened last year? Because I still haven't figured it out. I was so sure you were going to the World Series, but I mean, at this point, the way things have gone for you in the playoffs, do you kind of believe it is pretty much a crapshoot, this short series?
I do not believe it's a crapshoot. I know other people do. I do not. I do believe that you can have your heart broken by unfortunate situation. A blooper falls in, and of course you lose a ball game. I mean, but I don't think it's a crapshoot myself. I think that if you have certain attributes to your ball club, that it gives you a better chance to win than it does not. Doesn't always work, right? And anytime you're talking about a shorter series, the more if you're playing a 1-game playoff, well, it's tougher than a 3. Things can happen, but I think you build your club a certain way, and also being able to plan for a postseason can be important, because sometimes if it falls in and you don't win a certain series and your best pitcher can only pitch 1 game in a series, well, unfortunately, that may be the way it falls, but you're trying to avoid that. But last year, I think what ended up happening is I think that we got off. We played, great, as you said in the beginning. It'll be one of those that you always look back and say, geez, I wish we would have won. I think we could have won. But I tip my cap. I think the Diamondbacks made some real big changes, adjustments in how they faced our hitters at that particular time. Our guys were maybe a little slower to adjust or just went into a slump at that particular time, which happens. But they really took advantage of us in that regard, and I tip my cap to them because they pitched us so much differently. We chased so much those last couple games, and even though we're a club that chased and we're better this year, that's one of the adjustments we've made too. But they really took advantage of us at that time, and we just didn't quite make the adjustment.
Yeah, you talk about their adjustments. Now, maybe it was me because I'm 63. I couldn't see in that park in Chase Field. Do you think your players' vision was affected going from the outdoors to that dark stadium? I think they have upgraded their lights since.
They did, and I do think that was it did have an effect. I don't think, but I've been hearing that about Arizona for years when you talk about it. So I do think it had an effect, but both teams played the same way. And I would tell you that even it did, but we came back home leading 3-2. So we still had a chance to seal it. And that's what really caught me as much as a surprise, because we hadn't lost it at home during that whole time period. And we'd been playing really well, but at home in particular, and we end up getting beat twice here. So that's why I have to say, hey, they beat us, tip your cap to them, and hopefully we can go back and try to exceed that this year.
John gave his age at 63. I'll flatter you here, Dave. You look much better than him, and you turned 60. You turned 68 in July. I believe you're signed up to through 2017. So as a way to finish here, two-part question. You still at the top of your field? You still seem like you have a lot of energy for this. You mentioned the passion. How long do you want to do this? And I assume the culmination of this at some point is you're one of the handful of most successful executives in history is you end up in Cooperstown in the Hall of Fame. So those two things, how long do you want to do this? And how much would making it to Cooperstown mean to you?
Well, it's an interesting question because it comes up. I've got 3 more years after this year on my contract. And really, I'm very fortunate at this. I love what I'm doing. If I wasn't working for a team, I'd be going to the baseball stadium a lot to watch or watching games on TV all the time. And I'm healthy. So those are good things to have. And so I'm really not drawing a time frame on it. I would never want to work beyond my ability to produce at a top level for an organization. So I'll let that guide me, and my family knows that it's important for me to be active because it would drive me crazy to not be. I don't have a lot of other hobbies outside the game. In fact, hardly any, because I've been in the game for so long. And of course, anybody that would end up in Cooperstown, it's the ultimate for anyone, but that's not anything I think about because really you're focused on what you can control, which is to me coming to the game today, trying to beat the Texas Rangers tonight and anything we possibly can. And that's how you take it. And I enjoy doing that part of it. And I'm very fortunate to be able to do what I enjoy doing.
And you remain at the top of the field doing it, Dave. Your team is, as we speak, 34-14. It's the best record in the major leagues. You've done a great job there putting this together, getting the right man to manage it. And John and I appreciate you joining us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys.
Dave, thank you.
John and I, of course, thank Dave Dombrowski, the president of baseball operation of the Phillies, for joining us on the show. John, hit or error?
I'm going to give an error. I haven't given an error in a while, but I mean, I think I deserve an error. So I'm giving the error to me for saying that the Mets will be in the playoffs. I didn't guarantee it. I didn't press a button. I didn't do the Charles Barkley thing, but I said they'd be in the playoffs, and I wrote it as an early. I don't know, people who aren't newspaper people on the East Coast may not know. You write a column before the game, so it gets in the editions, the outer editions, Florida and what have you. And I wrote it before the game, and they lost the game 8-0. I stuck with it. Then they blew the next game with Diaz blowing that game. They did salvage one game, and now they've started with a loss in Cleveland. I don't feel too good about it, but I'm looking at my tweets. I clearly must deserve an error looking at my tweets because I think I have about 1,000 tweets telling me what an idiot I am. Idiot's a little strong. I'm going to go with imbecile, but I get an error.
John, for me, your error is always looking at mentions on Twitter. There's no or X or whatever it's called. There's no upside to it. So you're not. I care about you too much, and you're hurting your mental health by doing it. John, I'm going to do a hit this week. I'm up if anybody who's watching us on YouTube, I'm up at MLB Network. We're about to do MLB Now, and Brian Kenny, the host of the show, our friend, is doing a segment on who the top 10 shortstops were in the shredder before the season began and kind of where we are now. And a lot is falling out. Now, part of the problem is Gunnar Henderson was considered a third baseman and Mookie Betts a second baseman. And now they're in that group. But, I mean, we're talking about Volpe has grown and Bobby Witt Jr. and Dela Cruz. And I'm just wondering, are we entering this new shortstop era here where it is a little A-Rod, Jeter, Garcia-Parra, Tejada, where they kind of where you're going to be able to make a case that 4 or 5 of the best players in the whole sport. I mean, Witt and Henderson and Betts are probably 3 of the 5 best players right now in the sport. Dela Cruz is maybe the most exciting. We've seen real growth this year from Volpe. I think it's a brilliant shortstop class that is emerging. And of course, Betts is not emerging. He's an older player,
right.
but doing something incredible, playing shortstop for the first time in his life at a high level.
Yeah, it may eclipse the A-Rod, Jeter, Garcia-Parra era, which I didn't think would ever be eclipsed. Gunnar Henderson, arguably the MVP at this point. I guess you could argue for Soto, but I could see Gunnar Henderson MVP in the American League right now. Bobby Witt, obviously one of the most talented players in the game. Betts, fantastic. L.A. De La Cruz, 4 stolen bases and 4 hits the other day. He's on pace for more than 100 stolen bases. I mean, I'd even throw him in that mix right now. I mean, I like C.J. Abrams. I know he had a little bit of a rough patch there, but I think he's going to be a big star as well. So it is quite a great era for shortstop. Gunnar Henderson, what was he, picked number 42 by the Orioles? They had all these top picks, 1, 2, 5, what? Obviously, they got Holiday. He's going to be really good eventually. You got Kowser, you got Kerstad, but Gunnar Henderson, the 1 second rounder of that whole group, he's the best of them all.
Yeah, he was picked about 10, 12 picks after the Yankees took Volpe. So think about that in the American League East. I mean, the Yankees are not regretting Volpe, who looks like he's a solid young player who could handle New York and is getting better. John, I mentioned if people are watching us on the New York Post YouTube channel, I hope they're doing that. I hope they're listening to us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. I hope they're giving us 5-star ratings. I hope they're dropping. I'll read reviews. Right? I'm not going to read Twitter mentions, but I'll read some reviews. Thanks to our producer, Jake Brown, for helping us. I'm assuming that Tommy Hogan is helping us as well. I'm not sure. I think he usually is the guy who puts up the YouTube stuff. And John, boy, I think by the time we get to the next show, it's a third of a season. It happens really, really quickly. I hope everyone sticks with us on the show with Joel Sherman and Jon Heyman.